Welcome back. This is part 2 of the load development video series that I did for developing loads for handguns, how it basically is accomplished very easily, and how the information is easily accessible to anybody just by doing a few shots, which is part of the fun of owning a handgun or a rifle, is to actually shoot it. So it's not complicated, and I'd like you to see my first video where I explain the process and go through it in my loading bench, and you'll see how easy it is. So what we've got here is I've got the target set up at 25 yards. 25 yards is an excellent range to do your load testing, especially with longer barreled handguns. This is the 44 Magnum or 44 Special Redhawk, and it's loaded up, ready to go. I'm going to be basically fouling the bore with the first cylinder, just to make it so that I'm not testing a different kind of barrel with each of the loads. So I'll foul it up first with a few plinking shots before we begin the actual test series. But I got 4 targets downrange. That's 4 out of the 6 the 6 test slots that I'll be doing. Now, I recommend 25 yards as being the best range to sight in, especially longer barreled handguns, because it gives you a little bit better discrimination. If you get up too close with longer barreled handguns, even 6-inch handguns and 5-inch barrels, at 15 yards or 50 feet, many people will not be able to really discern one lot from another unless they're grossly out of line. But if you really want to find out what's the most potentially most accurate in your handgun, it's the same as a rifle. You want to get out at some distance where there's some discrimination factor, where you can actually see the results on paper. So all we're looking for today is basically to fire through a series of 6 test slots. It goes from, we're testing today this handgun with 44 Special, 240 grain hard cast lead bullets that I made. They happen to be Lee cast bullets, and they're largely wheel weight alloy with a little bit extra tin and antimony added in for harder bullets. I don't really need a hard bullet with this particular load. I'm shooting a low velocity target load that will run from about 720 to maybe 820 feet per second. And as you can see, the black flies are gathering here. I've got a herd of them flying around me. We really have a big problem with black flies and mosquitoes this time of year. This is the height of the season in New Hampshire. So the test series is between 4.2 and 4.7 grains of accurate number 2, which is that's the listed load differences that are actually cataloged in the accurate manual. So I'm going to be referencing those loads and going up just 1/10 of a grain per test lot. That 1/10 of a grain with such a small amount of a charge in this fairly spacious case will give very different results, and it's going to be somewhere around 20 feet per second difference for each increment as I move up. So it'll be a fun thing to do. Don't ever shy away from doing some load testing and evaluation, because you're shooting. It's part of the shooting fun. Just grab the gun. The only difference is that you're going to be a little bit more fussy making up your first loads. It gives you a little bit of familiarity with the loading process at the same time. And if I might say, once you've established the proper load, if you go back to my first video on this, you'll see that all you need to do is just simply set up your powder measure and throw your charges. These powders meter very precisely, right? Really better than a 1/10 of a grain. Far more precise than a 1/10 of a grain. They hit dead on every time. So you can throw your charges, whether it be in your in your Dillon press or your Lee Loadmaster or Hornady press or whatever it is, and you can crank them out. But you got to establish a load so you know what you're doing. That way there you can set your powder measure up to do some accurate shooting. All right, so let's begin. I've got the bench set up. I'm going to be showing you how to properly shoot from a bench with a handgun. But again, I'm going to simply fire off 6 shots, get this bore fouled up a little bit, so that I start out with the same type of barrel that I'll be doing my standard shooting with. Now let's see here if we can knock off that 25-yard. I suppose it's possible to miss that at this range. They did hit it, I think. We'll go up to 25 to 50 yards. There's another one out there, 50 yards. Did I hit it? That's the question. All right, the barrel's fouled up. I guess we'll continue with the testing. Okay, during this test series, as I said, I'm going to be shooting incremental test loads of 6 shots each, moving up. They're organized in this box, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so forth, and the 6th group is here. And they're just 1/10 of a grain variation between them. I'll take up a good, solid, steady rest. And it's very important when you're using a rest with a revolver, have some sort of protective material, thick material on it, because you're gonna ruin a very good, expensive bag otherwise. The gas that emits between the cylinder and the barrel will do a job and cut leather in two. So put our eye protection on, load up. So the first one, as I say, will be 4.2 grains of accurate number 2. And if you haven't watched my first video, accurate number 2 has got the same general burning rate as Red Dot. Red Dot is a powder that I've used very successfully in the 44 Special through the years, with a Super Redhawk and also with a Vaquero, a number of different guns. It's important to when you're taking a rest with a revolver, be mindful of that gas emission, but so you don't want to necessarily get too close to your rest and destroy it. But make sure that you have a good solid foundation. Just as with a rifle, I prefer not to rest the barrel on the gun cradle, because that can cause disruptions in the bounce of the gun that are different from when you're normally shooting. So let's begin. At the top left-hand target, sharp front sight, level sights, even on both sides. I can actually see that shot. It fell at about 12:30, 1 o'clock on the bull, just in the white. We're not interested in, I guess I'm going to have to take these off. They're fogging up today, so that kind of violates my standard rule of wearing eye protection at all times, but there's not much I can do about it. And that one fell at 9 o'clock on the bull, on the edge of the bull. So right now I've got about a 2 1/4 inch spread, I think. And that one fell at 7 o'clock. I'm going right around the bullseye. This is not necessarily, I would not want to take this load to the bank. I think that one stabbed the middle of the bullseye. 44 Special is a big, it's a big cartridge. It's a big hole, so it's very easy to pick it out at 25 yards. We'll move up to our next group. Now I always like to take a look at my primers, and it's not necessarily because these are overcharged by any means, but there's another thing that can happen with light loads. It's a phenomenon which is particular to light loads, where you can sometimes have primers that back out, and it's not a good thing. You want to have the primers always, when you're firing any firearm, centerfire gun, the primers will back out during the initial stage of ignition because the primer first pushes forward against the primer pocket and pushes itself out. But then the cartridge head rebounds back when the powder burns and seats itself around the primer again. But when you have a very light load, a very light charge, very frequently it can have the opposite effect of not rebounding back and reseating. So you want to have at least a minimum load. Typically, whatever your minimum loads are listed in the book, take that into consideration. So we're moving up to charge number 2. Six o'clock low. Well, that one actually fell about 3/4 of an inch from the first shot, so that's a encouraging. I can't tell. I may have had a little bit of primer back out on that one. The cylinder dragged a little bit. That's an indication of the primer backing out. This is a very, very light load. That load that I was plinking with at the beginning of the video, that was actually a much different charge. That was 44 Magnum light load. That was HS6 powder, about 8.5 grains of HS6, which is a very accurate load for 44 Magnum cases for a light charge. But it's a hefty plinking load. So now we're moving up to load number 3. I'll swing the camera around so you can see what they're doing yourself. Target number 3. I think I see that one at 5 o'clock in the inside the bull. I'm still getting a little bit of lock up here, so perhaps however, accuracy looks like it's tuning up a little bit. I think that'll do it. That's 6 right there. We'll move in so you can see. That's a I think that's a little bit handier load. We may be progressing up to something now that very frequently, as you move up the scale, you can have charges that produce a little bit more accuracy. It doesn't always work out that way. but very frequently that's the case. The last target now, bottom right target. And the recoil is suddenly becoming a little bit sharper. That one fell outside at 4 o'clock, and it was a good let off. Absolutely a sharper recoil now, a little bit more typical of a 44 Special. We're working at around, let's see, this is the 4th target. We're approaching, we should be approaching about maybe 800 feet per second. Good let off. Okay, now we're gonna check these primers. They look fine. Well, there's the results of the first 4 tests. I'm going to replace the top 2 targets, and we'll finish it up. We've got some sort of weather coming in, so I'm going to move right along. That doesn't mean I'm going to rush my shots. So far, I'm not happy with any of the loads that I've tested. Hopefully one of these will tune in. The last test, this is number 6. This is 4.7 grains of accurate number 2. Very, very light load in this big Redhawk. And that increment definitely added a little extra spice to the load. Feels nice. Okay, let's go down and see what they look like. We've got some sort of big storm coming in here, I think, in about 5 minutes. I always keep loaded up in this kind of country. Right at my house last night, we had a big bear come walking through the backyard, and Benny didn't like it very well. He sounded off. He was outdoors when the bear first started through, and well, let's see. This one here came from this group here. It looks like load number 3 has got the greatest potential. I have one flyer that's in this upper corner, but it appears that load number 3 might have some potential with this powder. It's an alternative powder. I don't think that I would necessarily call that the best situation for this gun. I've had more accurate loads, but the whole point of this discussion has been how to establish a good load by not necessarily relying on what other people are recommending, because this might be the very best load, or this might be a very best load for somebody else's handgun, or any one of them may be the very best load. But in this particular handgun, I can tell you that it's okay. It would be an okay plinking load, but with so many powders available, I should certainly try something else. I should probably work within the same velocity range. 800 feet per second at 25 yards definitely puts me right in the money. The upper 700s and 800s is a very, very accurate load comparative to the sighting in that I've done with the 44 Magnum. Well, that's it. Again, I'm glad you could join me for this outing. I think maybe this, whatever it was, passed over, and it's not threatening right now. And that means that the black flies have come back in a major swarm. But it was a good day. We learned something. Now, I didn't establish what I would say is a premier load for this gun. I certainly have had more accurate loads. This would be an acceptable plinking load. I think load number 3 seemed to be the one that turned out the most consistency. But I would consider any group that was somewheres around 1.5 to 2 inches minimum to be a fine load for this, and anything else is, it can only be acceptable. So I'll keep working. I do have other loads that I know perform very well in this, but apparently this powder is not one of them, so I'll move on. I think it was the most important thing is that I wanted to illustrate how to go through the testing process. And by doing your own testing, you can determine for yourself what's the best loads, and also you can weed out, this is just as important, weeding out the powders that are not going to work. Because you see so much stuff online that everybody is recommending this powder, that powder, or anything else. Any given powder can work with any particular handgun on any day, which is the same thing with rifles. There are no governing rules when it comes to powders or primers or anything else. So whether I try Winchester 231 ball powder the next time, or whether I try Unique or whatever it is, I'll be trying something else and having fun doing it. It's always fun to come out here with Benny, sit down at the bench, and crank off a few shots. In the meantime, I've got a bunch of rounds that I can plink with here, and these are my 8.5 grains or so, 8.6 grains of HS6, I think it is, with my 44 Magnum cases. They're a lot of fun, and so let's just have some fun and do what these guns do best, is to just have fun with them. Get my hearing protection in, because that'll be a startling revelation. I see some targets of opportunity out there at 50 yards. Well, right here I got a nice log right here. See if I can hit that log out there at 50 yards. I think I did. And there's a stick over to the right of it that's left of the targets. A little white thing at the bottom of the targets. There we go. That's it. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, tell your friends, and God bless. if I can knock that log there. Yes, sir. Nothing like a 44 Magnum light load to... God bless.